If you've ever rented an apartment or lived in a major city, then you've probably heard of rent control. So first things first, who created rent control? Surprisingly, Julius Caesar, who was known as a Roman general and statesman, enacted a law stating that a landlord could not charge more than the ancient Roman equivalent of $100 per year for a home in Rome. This came after a Roman senator appealed to the courts claiming his landlord tried to double his rent and he could no longer pay for it. So rent control laws were introduced to the United States in the 1920s to stop landlords from taking advantage of renters by continuously increasing rents. Now, as of 2022, only 5 states in the United States have rent control, which is California, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, Oregon, and the District of Columbia. And as of 2019, about 182 U.S. municipalities have rent control. There are 99 in New Jersey, 63 in New York, 18 in California, 1 in Maryland. However, the most popular cities with rent control are New York City, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Oakland, and Washington, D.C. Rent control applies to residential buildings constructed by February 1st, 1947 in municipalities that had not yet declared an end to post-war rental housing. Under rent control laws, tenants are not obligated to sign renewal leases as the tenants are statutory. Rent increases are limited and services and evictions are regulated. Rent control did not only affect the United States, but the United Kingdom as well. Rent control in the United Kingdom was first prompted by housing shortages during World War I. Yes, the United Kingdom also had rent control. The increase of rent and mortgage interest was the catalyst for rent control laws. This act was designed to prevent landlords from profiteering during the war years when demand for housing exceeded supply. Though originally intended as a temporary measure, rent controls continued to apply to certain dwellings until January of 1989. Now let's get back to the United States. Rent control measures were established in New York City during the 1920s as eviction cases rose and new construction slowed down during World War I. It was also put into place to fight inflation and prevent housing shortages during World War II. Rent control became politically popular after World War II when soldiers returned home and sought apartments for their families. The demand caused rents to increase, which led to a housing shortage. However, rent control is slowly becoming a thing of the past. There is an estimated amount of 16,400 units, or about 1% of rent-controlled apartments on the market with an average rent of $858. A tenant or a family member must have been living in the unit since at least July of 1971 and the building built by 1971. These buildings are also known as pre-war buildings. The good thing is that families can pass the unit to another family member and preserve the rent control status, but units are decontrolled once vacant. A unit that is no longer rent controlled can sometimes become rent stabilized or be leased at market rate. One con to rent-controlled apartments is that maintenance is lax or non-existent because of the poor return on investment for landlords. States that implement rent control can increase rent between 2% to 10% of the monthly rent cost per lease term. Keep in mind that it varies by state, city, or municipality. The rent cannot exceed a maximum base rent, which determines per unit and covers the landlord's maintenance costs. In units within single and two-family homes, the tenant must have resided in the unit continuously since March 31st, 1952 to qualify for rent control. 1952. Now, if you've lived this long, you've deserved a break on the rent. So we've spoken a bit about rent-controlled apartments, so let's talk about rent-stabilized apartments. So rent stabilization applies to buildings of 6 or more units built by the year 1974 that are not subject to rent control. Owners of more recent buildings can agree to rent stabilization in exchange for tax benefits. Regulations and policies vary by municipality. So, tenants who live in buildings built between February 1st, 1947 and January 1st, 1974, or who move into a pre-war building built by the year 1947, or who move into certain post-war buildings built in 1974 and after that receive tax breaks qualify for rent stabilization, but only if any of the above terms are met. That was a lot, I know. So what exactly is a pre-war building? So these are buildings built in the period between the turn of the 20th century until World War II. So these were buildings essentially built by the year 1947, mostly in or around New York City. Now, on the other hand, post-war buildings were typically built between the years of 1947 and 1990. So, however, it is not profitable or smart to purchase a rent-controlled property in today's climate. Well, not for market value, at least, from what I've seen in my own experience. However, I have heard that there is a loophole to getting around rent-stabilized laws. Well, that's what I heard, okay? So, if you found this video informative, hit the thumbs up button. Thank you for watching and subscribe for more. The end.